this is what I'm going to read. Ready? Alright. Hannah picked up a feather fan which had come all the way from Egypt. Are you ready, Tamar? She asked. A faint frown etched its way across her lovely face as she surveyed her daughter. The child was so thin, so pale. If only there were something she could do to put a little flesh on those bones. But feed Tamar on the richest food, and still she looked as though she was dying of starvation. Beauty was of vital importance to Hannah. She herself had also been beautiful, and she went to considerable expense to preserve and enhance that beauty. Her clothes were chosen with the utmost care. She darkened her exquisite brows with kohl. She used skin bleaches and ointments, and kept her hair lustrous by means of fragrant oils, and regular washings tinted her cheeks and lips with a salve made from cochineal, Cochineal, and dyed her palms and nails and the soles of her small feet with a concoction she brewed from powdered henna leaves. You look very sweet, she said to her daughter. Then she called lightly to her husband. We are ready, Jairus. He was seated on the other side of the room, while Aminadab, his personal servant, stood behind his chair, winding his richly brocaded turban in the prescribed manner. Look at her parents. Tamar felt an exorbitant pride in them. She was glad her mother was young and slender, and she considered her father the handsome man in the world. Jairus, 40 on his last birthday, was not over 5 feet 10, but he carried himself with such an air of dignity that he appeared taller. How strong he was, strong, scholarly, always immaculately groomed, richly and fully garbed. Strangers recognized at a glance that he was someone of importance. Kind of like Charlie Kirk, probably, I guess, huh? Who was that man? They would often ask of the townspeople, whereupon the Capernite would smile, sighing, That is Reb Jairus ben Ezram, our ruler. The turban was wound now, and Jairus and his family left the big room and walked through a wide, luxurious courtyard, where palm and fig trees grew, toward a stout wooden gate, which a manservant hastened to open. Accustomed as they were to the beauty of the vista which now confronted them, they nevertheless paused to admire it. The ruler's house was built high on the slope of a hill. From where they stood, they could look down upon the city, upon the beach and the fishers' shacks, and the blue of the Sea of Galilee. From this vantage point, the sea, which was really a large lake, looked so smooth that it might have been made of blue glass, wherein the tall mountains which surrounded it so protectingly were clearly reflected. Though the rainy season had not ended today, the sun was shining on the encompassing mountains' peaks. The snow, with the rays of the sun upon it, was streaked with lovely, tranquil pink and violet shadows. So the ruler and his family, turning their appreciative gaze to the right, could see the beautiful new synagogue of which Capernaum was so proud. There it stood, facing the sea, its wide white columns rising clean and majestic, and broad portico, upon which now several sightseers lingered, adding an inviting air of serenity and richness. Down near the beach was the equally impressive Roman custom house, while beyond it rose the huge stone walls of the Roman garrison and its high watchtowers, seeming to dominate the synagogue and the entire countryside with all the arrogance of the splendor of Rome itself. "Oh, it's so beautiful!" exclaimed Tamar. Involuntarily they started walking down the hill, not hurriedly, but with dignity befitting a ruler and his family. Passing the imposing home of Matthew, they saw the customs officer just leaving on his way to take up his duties at the custom house. He wore the best clothes money could buy, and his badge of office was displayed so prominently that even a fool would know he had donned it with with defiance. Oh, he had donned it with defiance because it was the stamp of his degradation, branding him openly as a traitor to his people. He was a short, thick-set man, and Tamar always thought he had a nice face. The ruler nodded a brief and frigid greeting while stalking little Matthew gave a low, respectful bow. He made no attempt to stop them, for no matter how rich he grew or how important his duties, no tax gatherer could ever associate with people like the ruler. Nor had he been invited today to Joab's ben Zakkai's bar mitzvah. Somehow Tamar felt sorry for Matthew. She thought it must be sad to be snubbed like that. Sad to be excluded, almost as though he were a leper. She did not question why such things should be. All customs officers were grafted, cheating not only the Romans, but their own people. All were traitors, for they were in the pay of Rome, and Rome was a name to be feared and hated. That was the way people felt throughout Palestine. So Matthew, shunned by respectable society, had to find his own circle of friends among those who were likewise shunned. Fellow tax gatherers, publicans, and those Tamar's groups referred to as sinnahs. Capernaum on the northwestern shore of the big lake, stretching upward proudly upon the slopes of a hill. The only home Tamar had ever known. Its real name was Capernaum, and it was derived from the prophet Nahum, who had lived there long ago. Tamar had never been farther away from Capernaum than its untidy suburb Bethsaida, or Fishertown, because she was considered too delicate for long journeys. It was she knew a heavy trial to her parents have only one child, and that one a daughter and a semi-invalid. They adored her, pampered her, and insistently worried about her. She knew that her father would gladly have relinquished all the honors that had been heaped upon him, if by doing so he could somehow have purchased health for her. As ruler, Jairus ben Esrom was the most important person in the city. He was not only its mayor, he was its chief judge. His was the deciding voice in all matters of synagogical synagogical. The exalted position required that the one holding it be a man of wisdom and unimpeachable rectitude. His knowledge of the law, the scriptures, and the prophets must be above reproach, which meant that he must have had a rabbinical training. The position could not be secured by bribery to be made ruler. Jairus had been ordained, and unless he were to behave in a manner of coming in his high post, he would remain ruler of Capernaum until his death. However, if he were once to act in a way reflecting discredit upon his office, the Beth Din could remove him by a unanimous vote. The Beth Din of which he was the head was the local Sanhedrin, the tribunal before which cases connected with the synagogue or involving a breach of the Mosaic law could be heard. It was composed of 23 members, all of whom to be versed in the law, and was answerable only to the great Sanhedrin of 70 members, with headquarters in the Temple of Jerusalem. Because of her frailty, Tamar had no friends of her own age. Consequently, she was more adult in her thinking than most girls of 11. To keep her amused, her indulgent father had spent every moment he could spare from his business and his duties at the synagogue with her, telling her the legends of her people, teaching her the wise sayings of the prophets, and explaining the intricacies of the law. He had welcomed her queries, answering them honestly, and not as though she were a child, incapable of comprehending such manners. "My father," she had asked one day, "why do we Hebrews refuse to associate with Romans, and why do we call them unclean?" "The Romans," he explained gravely, "are pagans, or heathens. They believe, as do other Gentiles, in many gods, and they make statues of these gods and pray to them. But we Jews are unique because we believe in only one God. That is why we isolate ourselves from the pagan world which surrounds us and to which we refer as darkness. Our laws were given us by God through Moses. The Gentiles consider these laws absurd and resent us because we adhere to them. But Marcellus Florius does not resent us," which Marcellus Florius reminds me of a Josephus, something like Florius, I don't know, "is the exception. He has lived among us a long time. He understands us, and we trust him. But even so, the law is the law, and since he is a Gentile, we cannot invite him to our homes, nor can we break bread with him." Tamar thought affectionately of Marcellus Florius. He was over 60, upright and soldierly, of medium height, with wiry gray hair, and a beardless face. Marcellus had been sent to Capernaum garrison when he was young. Like all Romans, he had considered the Jews a funny people, and had ridiculed them because it was smart to do so. But he had fallen in love with Galilee, with the land of Galilee itself, its picturesque streams and many wells, its thriving olive groves, and its dense forest of evergreen oak, its rich field of corn and wheat. Several times he had been offered promotion if he would accept posts in other countries, but Marcellus was not ambitious, and Galilee had come to seem like home. The Roman soldiers were forbidden to interfere with the Jews in any way unless one of them did or said something which could be interpreted as traitorous to Caesar. They had no jurisdiction whatsoever over a Jew. The Capernaum was wholly a Hebrew city, and Beth Din held its own trials and dealt out its own punishments. Gradually and grudgingly, Marcellus had come to admire the Jews. On the whole, they were austere and orderly. They kept the city a model of cleanliness. They cared for their own poor. They were devoted to their families and completely absorbed in their religion. Recently, when we learned that they proposed to build a new synagogue in Capernaum, he had donated so liberally to this project that he had practically built the whole structure. They were astounded that he, a Roman, could do this, and they were profoundly grateful. Because of Marcellus Florius, Tamar felt that she could never hate the Romans. In fact, she secretly admired them. She thought the Romans' men were handsome, which their cropped hair and shaven faces handsomer, indeed, than the Hebrew men who wore their hair to their shoulders with prayer curls on each side, and were so proud of their beards, and they were forever oiling and stroking them. As the area through which Jairus and his family now walked on their way to Joab's bar mitzvah became more populous, people made way for them, bowing respectfully as the richly robed family passed. Turning a corner to ascend another steep grade, the one which led directly to the ornate house of Zacchaeus, they saw their friend the centurion in his familiar uniform, a leather-fringed cuirass over a linen tunic, a full military cape of vivid red, and stout high-laced sandals. He was accompanied by a tall, well-dressed youth of about 16, so handsome that Tamar thought he must be some young Roman prince. Marcellus was evidently showing him the sights, for the centurion waved his hand in the direction of the custom house, where a long line of camels stood with their drivers, who were awaiting their turn to have their merchandise inspected, weighed, and taxed. Then seeing Jairus, he smiled broadly, starting jauntily toward him, and stopped, eventually telling the boy to remain a few yards in the rear. Then the old soldier moved forward again and gave the ruler a crisp soldierly salute. "Greetings, Jairus. A fine day young Joab has for this bar mitzvah, as my friend has said, and how it is with you? The day finds you well." "Never better." Marcellus nodded respectfully to Hannah and gazed admiringly upon Tamar. "This daughter of yours is growing up, Jairus. It will not be long before she wears the veil. In a few months she will be 12, answered Hannah, or Shana. "Now tell us, sir, I have never seen that young man before. Is he a relative here for a visit?" Tamar could scarcely wait for the centurion's reply. She and the boy were regarding each other steadily. To Julian, from his advanced age of 16, she seemed only a sweet-looking, overly thin child, but Tamar was breathless at the wonder of the splendid young stranger. She had never felt like this about any boy before. Subconsciously and trembling, everything about him seemed wonderful. The way he stood, with his straight long legs parted, the proud set of his broad shoulders, the slight wave in his brown hair, and just fine modeling of his nose. That nose. Yeah. That is Julian, replied the centurion, smiling my new servant. Servant, could that handsome youth be only a servant? Obviously, Hannah felt the same way. I could never take that boy for a servant, she answered quickly. No? Well, you see, Julian's grandfather and I were lads together. His family were patricians, but his father's fingers, like those of many soldiers, were too nimble with the dice. When I heard that Julian's parents had died, leaving him penniless, I knew that would mean for a boy brought up as an aristocrat. So I sent for him. I find him a splendid lad, just like his grandfather. Already I feel as though Julian were my own son. I am lonely sometimes, and he feels a deep need in my life. Tamar had listened eagerly to this explanation for Julian, though a servant and a Roman had suddenly become her idol. She wanted him to notice her, wanted to talk to him, wanted to know him. The camel caravan, released from its inspection at the custom house, passed them as it started on its way to Damascus. It raised so much dust that Hannah coughed and reached for Tamar's hand. Oh, this dust! It is bad for Tamar. We must not tarry here. Besides, we are really quite late. Good day to you, Centurion, and I am happy and truly happy that you have this boy to take care of you. The ruler and his family took leave of Marcellus. Tamar could not see the young Roman any more without turning her head, which of course she could not do with propriety. But her mind was full of him. What sort of person was he? Was he conceited because he was so handsome? Would she think him so wonderful if she could come to know him? Remembering that the Roman hated and mistrusted Jews, she wondered if this attractive stranger shared the general feeling. For the first time in her life, she was troubled about this hatred. Why should such a thing be? Little Tamar was no longer in a party mood. She wanted to be alone, to think about a Roman named Julian.